Hi, welcome to Qualifying and Studying for the PMP exam. The purpose of this webinar is to talk about how to study on your own for the exam. There are a variety of ways that you can study for the PMP exam. First of all, you can study books in addition to the Handbook guide. That works to some extent. However, you can't expect to know every single area of project management and the likely questions that you might face on the PMP exam. The best way to self-study is to take a course provided by a registered education provider. So before we go into the details, let me introduce you to the PMP Exam Prep Camp course by Praise Iron Media. This course enables you to study on your own for the PMP exam by using our learning management system, logging online and studying 35 hours of project management. So I advise you, if you are trying to study for the exam on your own and you don't have your contact hours yet, probably this solution is what you should go for. As I said earlier, this is a 35 contact hour course, also eligible for PDUs if you are a PMP wanting to familiarize yourself with the Handbook Guide 4th edition. So if you want to study on your own, have a reliable source of information to take you through the Handbook Guide and get you ready for the exam, you can take our course. Totally online, self-study, online mentoring also available through email. We offer end-to-end mentoring. We enable you gauge if you're ready or not. We talk about the requirements for the exam. If you're not sure about what the requirements are, we can help you fine-tune your understanding of this, and also regarding the application, the guidelines, knowing if you're really and truly ready by means of professional experience. We can also help you in that area. Whatever else you need to know, we can also advise. People ask the question, how do I know whether I'll be audited or not? There's really no way of knowing. It's all probability based. However, we can prepare you for auditing. We can prepare you for the application process. Anything you are concerned about, we can give you the right information. We offer 360-degree guidance. We don't leave you hanging. We make sure that you have direct access to project management professionals who can advise and help you through your course study. We are dedicated to success and we're passionate about your goals. We actually tailor this course to meet your needs, not only for the PMP exam, but from a professional standpoint. These courses are designed to specification, based on real-world project management. We offer end-to-end Handbook Guide coverage, going through all the chapters from 1 to 12. We also have PMP Exam Prep tests at the end of every chapter, and a final test, which is a 4-hour test to really evaluate and see if you're ready for the exam or not. We have different flavors of this: live and interactive classroom. We have virtual classroom sessions, and we also offer self-study aids and materials. So in totality, this is a 360-degree view of the project manager's life, the project management professional lifestyle. We believe project managers should be knowledgeable in best practices, versatile, confident, mentors of others, proficient in whatever they do, aware of the triple constraint, fixers who get it done, having a mindset to come up with solutions to the problems. We ensure that the project manager becomes an asset to the organization and not a liability. We also ensure that project managers have an all-over-it mindset, which means as far as scope, budget and time are concerned, the PMPs who we develop and train come out with that knowledge and with that ability to be on top of projects. Because it's one thing to be PMP certified, it's another thing to be on top of your project on a daily basis and be an asset to your organization. So PMP Exam Prep Camp is a fantastic course. We offer a lesson on professional responsibility. We focus on the relevant calculations. We focus on the relevant information that you need to know. So visit www www.praizion.com, praizion.com, to get more information about the PMP Exam Prep course. Now, let's move on to talk about questions. If you've got any questions whatsoever, email us, info@praizion.com. If you want us to come to your organization, if you have any question regarding project management, we want to hear from you. Now let's move on to talk about who the PMI is. Who is the PMI? You've probably heard about the Project Management Institute. That is what PMI stands for. The PMI is the leading global association for the project management profession. When you're talking about who is who in the world of project management, you need to talk about the PMI. They were founded in 1969. The PMI is a not-for-profit organization. They're really dedicated to furthering the project management profession, project management standards and techniques. There are 3 certifications that you've probably heard of from the PMI: the PMP, the CAPM, and the PGMP. There are other certifications in risk management and schedule management. But these 3, the PMP, the PGMP, and the CAPM, are probably the most widely known ones. The PMI is dedicated to advance the practice and the science of the project management profession worldwide. Currently, over 500,000 members and credential holders. Over 250 chapters in 70 countries or more. That goes a long way to tell you that the Project Management Institute is here to stay. It's definitely a fantastic organization. If you are pursuing the project management profession, become a member of the PMI. Get PMP certified or CAPM certified. The PMI have been key in coming about with global standards worldwide. There are 11 global standards, including program and portfolio management, in the PMI suite of standards. There are 2 million copies of a guide to the project management body of knowledge known as the Handbook guide in circulation today. The PMI has also helped business professionals start, build, or advance their careers in project management, program management, and portfolio management. The PMI is here to stay. Now take a look at your screen. You can see the Handbook Guide 4th edition. 60% of the PMP exam comes from here. This is a must read. You absolutely need to have read the Handbook Guide 4th edition. If you have not studied the Handbook Guide 4th edition and you are about to take the PMP exam, you need to go back and ensure that you understand what is in the Handbook Guide. Now let's talk about the PMI Footprint. You can see on your screen the PMI Footprint today, where different members of the PMP emerge from worldwide. This is very important to grasp when you're trying to analyze, why should I take the PMP exam? You can see the footprint. It's absolutely huge. You can see that in the different countries of the world, people are gravitating towards the PMP certification. The project management professional, the PMP, is an individual who is responsible for all aspects of the project for the life of the project. So if you're aspiring to become PMP certified, bear in mind that PMPs are responsible for all aspects of the project for the life of the project. You have to demonstrate that you are capable in leading all aspects of the project for the life of the project. You also have to demonstrate that you can lead cross-functional teams. You can direct cross-functional teams to deliver projects on time, on budget. You also need to demonstrate sufficient knowledge and experience to apply a methodology to projects. It's not enough to stab in the dark when things happen. The PMP needs to know what he can do, know his possibilities and his options, and know what to do in each situation. The Project Management Professional Certification also requires documented experience in project management, formal documented education in project management. The PMP certification is here to stay, and it's globally expanding in reach. So people ask the question, why should I become PMP certified? There are lots of other standards out there, lots of other ways of managing projects. Being a PMP demonstrates your professionalism. It sharpens your knowledge and skills, because there are lots of things you take for granted daily as a project manager that being a PMP will call to your attention. When you study the Handbook guide, you'll see terms that you should be using, but perhaps you don't use because you don't know about them. So it will sharpen your knowledge and your skills. It will give you great networking options, being a member of the PMI, being a PMP. It's a fantastic opportunity. Greater professional options and possibilities are available to people affiliated with the PMI and who are project management professionals. Being a PMP gives you a voice in your organization. You need to visit www.praizon and look for 10 reasons to be PMP certified. It's a free video, but it will give you lots more information about why you should be PMP certified. Now on your screen here you can see the growth in PMP certification. From 1990s all the way up to 2007 at the time of this presentation, you can see that the PMI has grown in terms of the PMP certification from 10,000 members, 10,000 PMP certified members, all the way up to over 250,000 PMPs. In fact, today, 2009, you have a lot more PMPs than is documented in this presentation. So let's talk about the PMP exam, because remember, we're talking about how to study for the exam. Now, you may already have studied for the exam. Perhaps you're absolutely ready to take the exam. Well, this module will be very helpful to you, because this module addresses the PMP exam, what you need to know about it. So first of all, let's talk about what you need to do before you even click on that mouse to start the exam. You need to be aware that it is a computer-based exam, or it could also be a paper-based exam. It depends on how you registered. Now, if it's a computer-based exam, I will call your attention to the information that you need to read on the screen even before you start the exam. You see, you have a set of instructions that instruct you on how to navigate the exam, how to navigate from question to question, what you can do, what you can't do. You need to understand the instructions. So the moment you get into the exam, you will be given the instructions on the screen for you to read for about 15 minutes. Now, don't skip over the questions. It's important that you read them. Now, if you end up reading the questions before the 15 minutes is up, and you're absolutely comfortable and sure that you understand how to navigate the exam, then you could spend the extra time you have from those 15 minutes jotting down formulas or key information that you think will help you in the exam. You see, you will be given a sheet of paper, you will be given a pencil, you might be given other things to use in the exam, but you have to return them at the end. You're not allowed to take them out. However, make sure that you write down the formulas, key formulas that you're not very familiar with, but you remember at the time you start the exam, like earn value formulas, earn value metrics. Perhaps you even understand lots more that will come out in the exam, but you may have a tendency of forgetting it. You want to make sure you write those down so that when the time comes, you'll have something to refer to. Also bear in mind regarding inputs, tools and techniques and outputs or processes that you feel are relevant and you want to write them down, you can do it now within that time that you still have for the instruction revision. When you're done with the instruction revision, going over the instructions and you're sure that you're ready for the exam starts. Now, what you need to note in the exam is the exam is based on probability. It's not based on who you are, how qualified a project manager you are. The exam is based on a pool of questions that are randomly served to you. So it has nothing to do with your expertise. It has everything to do with probability. So you can be served any questions from that huge pool of questions that the PMI has. When you get those questions, before you dive deep into them, make sure that you study and read the question carefully, because lots of these questions are probably things you already know. However, the answers, if you choose the answers hastily, you end up missing the answer to the question. So you need to study the question, and you also need to make sure you read the answers very carefully. In fact, someone once suggested read the answers from the bottom up, because you have options A, B, C, and D. It's a multiple choice question. You have to choose one in each scenario. So from D to A, you can read the answers up, because lots of times people skip over maybe option B or C. You need to make sure you read all the options, weigh all the options, eliminate the options that are not sensible, because some of the options may not make sense altogether. Usually 2 options are just totally ridiculous. So you can eliminate those ones, but the remaining 2 that you've got, you really need to think what makes one option better than the other. So read carefully, and if you're not sure of an answer, you can mark that question and you can come back to the question later. You have 4 hours. You need to make sure that you use all those 4 hours. So when you are done with the first go round, maybe you go through all the questions and you get to the end. Hopefully by then you would have marked those you're not sure of. Then go back again. You can navigate to the ones that you marked for revision, and you can try answer those. Probably by the time you're done with the first go round, some of the information may come back to you and you might be sure. However, one thing I would say is do not second guess yourself. You need to ensure that you are absolutely sure of what you choose, and don't go back and change it, because usually that is not a good idea. So when you have done all that, another thing you can do is skip questions that are wordy and long and you have no idea about what they're talking. Mark that question, come back to it. It's better to skip a question and focus on questions that are easy. Get them out of the way, answer them, because you might be able to answer, say, 100 questions in average of 30 seconds each. There's some questions that are so easy, you can answer them quickly. So get over those ones before you concentrate on the difficult ones. Still on the exam, you have 3 chances to pass the exam in 1 year. Assume you took the exam in January. God forbid, whoever took the exam failed it. They would have 2 other opportunities in that year. So they took it in January, they've got February till December to take the exam and pass it in 2 tries. Perhaps they took the exam again in June, and let's say whoever did it didn't do too well. So this individual took the exam in January and June, and they've got 1 more try. Now, assume they took it in December. This person takes the exam in December and fails it again. After that, they will not be able to take the exam until the following December. So they'll have a whole year to wait before they take the exam again. So it makes sense after the first failure to absolutely study harder, look at your PMP results sheet and make sure you focus on areas of weakness, so that the second time you do it, you'll absolutely pass it much better than you ever could. Because the first time you do it, you're gaining experience and you're gaining knowledge of, well, the questions are going to be like that. So when you're studying, you know how to study the second time, hopefully. Now the third time, it's really bad. If you fail it the third time, it means that there's a flawed concept or a flawed approach to your study. Flawed approach to how you answer questions. So you absolutely need to make sure that you study to the best of your ability the second and more so the third time. Now the cost of retest is $275 for members currently, $375 for non-members. That's a lot of money that you're throwing away there. Member fees for the exam itself. For PMI members, it's $405, non-members, currently $555, and the cost for PMI membership is $129. So it really makes sense to be a PMI member and take the exam, because it only comes to $534 versus $555. Another good thing about being a member is it affords you the ability to receive lots of good information, magazines, correspondence. You get a free copy of the Handbook guide. So it's definitely a must-have for you if you haven't taken the exam, or even if you're PMP certified. Get membership and get all the perks that come with it. Now, talking about PMP exam content. On the screen you can see initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling and closing, the 5 process groups. That is really the breakdown for the exam. So you need to be aware of the process groups, obviously, and the structure of the exam. But the third component is be aware of the percentages from each area, including professional responsibility. Because this area, professional responsibility, is 9%, initiating is 11%, and closing is 9%. Put those together and you've got 29%. And 29% of the exam is huge. So if you haven't mastered these areas that look like small areas, they're not that important. You could find it a little bit difficult on the exam. So make sure you have everything down from initiating to closing, and professional and social responsibility. You need to ensure you have that covered as well. For that reason, you need to study the PMP Handbook, which means you need to delve into the details at the back, somewhere towards page 35. You need to read the PMI Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, which is also part of that document. So read the PMP Handbook, go to the PMI Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. Understand what you're meant to do as the project manager when it comes to professional responsibility. Those 3 areas, closing, professional responsibility and initiating, those 3, you definitely want to look at them as a huge chunk, because if you get all that muddled up, you could end up failing the exam. Now let's talk about the PMI Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. What does the project manager really need to know about the Code of Ethics? At a high level, you need to be aware of fairness. You need to be aware of being fair to your organization, being fair to your stakeholders, doing the right thing. You need to be aware of respect of cultures, respect of other people's cultures, and what you're meant to do in different scenarios. For example, someone wants to give you a bribe for something. What do you do? Someone wants to be unjust in a particular situation. How should you counteract that? What should you do? Someone lies about being a PMP. What should you do? Report the person to the PMI. And questions such as that. You need to be aware of what to do professionally in different scenarios. Now also, you need to be aware of your responsibility as the project manager. On the exam, you could be asked, what does the project manager do in this scenario? Or what does the project manager do in that scenario? Perhaps you're the project manager on a project and you specify in the contract that the vendor must meet this quality standard in a particular deliverable. And he doesn't meet it, but at the end of the day, the schedule is at the tail end. You've only got 2 days left to complete the project, and you're given a wrong deliverable, which works. Say the deliverable works. And the question is, what should the project manager do? You have a deliverable that will work, but it's not really according to the contract, but it can work. What do? You need to understand the responsibility of the project manager to uphold the contract. Or you're asked, what should the project manager do when a stakeholder comes with an increment that was not originally agreed? Do you accept the change in scope? Do you discuss it with your boss? What do you do? Well, one governing fact is the project manager should always weigh the possibilities and look at the consequence of his actions. So always be analytical. Never think about discussing with your boss before you think about what happens or what the analysis is. Always think about the analysis first. Analyze the situation rather than go straight to your boss. Also be aware that the project manager has powers to be used. You will be tested on how decisive you are as a project manager, how proactive you are, the use of the work breakdown structure, and the importance of communication. Another important one is stakeholders. Being aware of who stakeholders are, the power of stakeholders, how to manage them, human resource management, how to acquire your project team and manage them, crashing and fast tracking, closing a project, motivational theories, conflict resolution, organizational theories, and so on. There's so many areas that you need to master for the exam. So the best way to do this is to really go into the depth of the PMBOK guide and ask yourself, do I understand every process? Do I understand all the process groups? Can I explain in my own words all the knowledge areas, all the tools, all the techniques, all the inputs, all the outputs? Do I really understand these, and can I explain them? Again, you have 4 hours on this exam, 200 multiple choice questions. Be aware that 25 of these questions do not count. There's a passing score that is undisclosed currently. In the past, this used to be 106 out of 175 to give you a rough idea. But your passing the exam is really based on how well you do and also the complexity of the questions you might be served. It has changed over the years from being graded as 106 out of 175 or some other mark to an undisclosed mark, because it's really graded by psychometricians and people who will target what the overall score should be based on the difficulty of the questions you're served. So you can't assume that your questions are the same as your friend, your colleague who did the exam. It all differs. What you need to know is do the best that you can to answer as many questions as possible, and if possible, answer all the questions on the exam. You have 4 hours. 4 hours for 200 questions really means you have an average of 1.5 minutes, thereabouts, or less, to answer all the questions. 240 minutes to answer 200 questions. So that tells me 240 minutes for 200 questions. You have a little over a minute to answer each question. So you need to use the time wisely and use all of it. Read all the options. Like I said, one is usually the best answer. You have many good options, but only one option is best. For example, I am experiencing a problem on my project. My earned value is 2. My planned value is 5, which means what I planned is more than what I actually have. And I can say my stakeholders are giving me lots of grief over the project. I have issues. What do I do with this information? My earned value is 2. My planned value is 5. Do I talk to my boss about it? Do I find out what the problem is? Do I talk to stakeholders, and so on? The best answer is to find out what the problem is. Do an analysis. You could talk to your boss, but that's not the best thing to do. And that's not really the first thing to do. Really, when you talk about the best answer on the PMP exam, we're really talking about what should you do first? What's the most important thing to do? Because you as the project manager need to have a solution when you go to your boss. You don't just go to your boss without a solution, because you wouldn't really be a project manager who's applying project management concepts. You'll just be like an admin who really cannot take the law into his or her hands. So you need to take the law into your hands, be at liberty, find out what the problems are, take action when you can, and if you need authority before you take action, that's when you go to the sponsor or your boss. But you don't do that first. So beware of generalizations as well, such as every project manager should do this, or every sponsor should do that, or project manager should never do that, or project managers always have to do that, and so on. all those generalizations are traps. They're traps set to make you fail that question. You need to be aware of those. So now we've talked about the exam. Let's talk about how to study for the exam. Because it's one thing to know what the exam has in store, and it's another thing to have a good study attitude. If you don't have a good study attitude, you find out that you're just studying and nothing's sticking, and you do all the exams that you can, mock exams, and you always find yourself doing not too well. And you think, oh, well, the exam probably won't be that hard. Don't fool yourself. If you find out that you're not getting good grades on mock exams, that's a huge indicator that you might fail the exam. So you want to have good study attitudes. So what should I do first of all? I'm just about to start studying for the PMP exam. First thing you need to do, understand the material at a high level first. The reason why you need to understand at a high level is so you have direction. The key things to know at a high level are, how is the PMBOK guide broken down? You need to understand that the PMBOK guide is broken down by process group and by knowledge area and by chapter. So you have chapters 1 to 12, and chapters 1, 2 and 3 are the introduction, the project life cycle and organization in chapter 2, and project management processes for a project in chapter 3. Then chapters 8 to 12 break down project management by knowledge area, project integration management, chapter 4, project scope management, chapter 5, and so on. You need to understand the layout of the PMBOK guide at a high level. Understand the objectives of the PMBOK guide. Why am I studying this book? The reason why you study chapter 1 is to give you an introduction, to enable you understand what project management is, what program management is, what portfolio management is, what enterprise environmental factors are, factors that contribute to the success of your project, factors that govern how you manage your project. You need to understand that. Then you move into chapter 2. You need to understand what a project life cycle is, or what a project management life cycle is versus a product life cycle. You also need to understand organizational process assets in chapter 2. Chapter 3, you need to understand all the processes for a project, the 42 processes in the PMBOK Guide 4th edition. That's what you need to understand in chapter 3. Chapter 4, you need to understand how to integrate a project, how to combine the different components of the project. Chapter 5, how to identify what to do in the project, scope management. How do I identify the project scope? How do I control it? How do I manage it? That's chapter 5. Chapter 6 is on project time management. How do I develop the tasks to be done? How do I put that into an activity list? How do I get a schedule? Those are things you study in chapter 6. Chapter 7 is all about cost. How do I estimate cost? How do I budget cost? How do I control my cost when I'm done? Chapter 8 is all about project quality management. How do I manage quality on a project? Where do I even start to talk about quality? Well, you need to plan quality. Then you need to have plans for making sure quality is in the work being done. That's where you talk about perform quality assurance, and then you move into perform quality control. Chapter 9, Project Human Resource Management. How do I acquire the people that I need on the project? How do I manage them? How do I make sure they're mentored? And so on. Chapter 10, Project Communications Management. What do I need to do to plan communications? How do I do it? Chapter 10 is all about that. Chapter 11 talks about risk management. How do I manage risk on a project? How do I know what to do regarding risk? When do I perform qualitative risk analysis versus quantitative risk analysis? That's chapter 11. And chapter 12 is project procurement management. How do I know what I need to procure? How do I know I need vendors or services for my project? How do I go about doing that? That is what project procurement management is all about. So that's the PMBOK guide at a very high level. You need to understand the objectives of the PMBOK guide at a very high level. Do not start studying the PMBOK without knowing where you're going. Study the PMBOK guide knowing what you're doing and where you're going. Very important. Now, another key thing to do when you're studying is take practice tests. We have all sorts of practice tests. We've got PMP Exam Prep Camp. We've got a 4-hour test at the end of that. All through the study, we also have tests at the end of each chapter. Very good tools. In addition to that, we have the PMBOK Guide Audio Digest with the workbook. In the workbook, at the end of each module, we have questions. You need to ensure that you understand what you are studying. Even if you don't use our material and you use other material, ensure that you understand what you are studying at the end of each module. If you don't do a practice test at the end of each module, you have only really exercised your studying ability without validating and testing to make sure that what you have studied is really right and that you understand it. The only way to do it is take practice tests. I suggest practice tests from a registered education provider, from a reliable source. Do that. Do not cram. You have to understand what you study. It's one thing to pick up the PMBOK Guide 4th edition and look at page 43 and cram all the processes, all the knowledge areas, all the process groups, and say, yes, I understand this perfectly. But when people ask you, what does this process entail? What are the tools and techniques of this process? Or which of these tools and techniques is definitely not used for this process? You find out that you don't know because you've crammed and you haven't really understood what you've studied. So it's important that you understand what you're studying. Don't cram it. Understand why the answer is what it is. Use the proven methodology of knowing why an answer is right, and then you'll be able to apply that understanding to similar questions. Because believe me, you won't get the same questions that you get in the practice tests. You'll get similar questions that could come in other forms on the PMP exam. So don't cram. Now, do not second guess yourself. I talked about this previously. It's one thing to absolutely know that you were wrong the first time, but it's a second thing to kind of guess, maybe I was wrong, so I'm going to change my answer. Don't do that. Go with your gut. If you take the exam and you find out that you're absolutely sure about an answer, when you're doing a review, don't go back and change the answer, because it's most likely you'll get the answer wrong. Your gut is always to be trusted, except you absolutely know. And remember, oh, how could I say that? Of course I'm wrong. I'm wrong because that, and you can change the answer. Otherwise, leave the answer as is. Focus on your weak areas. I often talk about being a scheduling expert. I love scheduling. It's a wonderful, wonderful art. The art of scheduling is knowing what should come before a particular task and why, and knowing what comes next, and be able to identify downstream all the deliverables that need to be accomplished and plan them in a coherent order. That's what scheduling is about, and I love scheduling. Wonderful art, wonderful science, whatever you want to call it. Microsoft Project, Primavera, it's all fun. However, I can't dwell on scheduling all day long because I love it. If I'm taking the PMP exam, I need to focus on my weak areas. So I would focus on areas I'm not really familiar with. You should adopt the same. If you are good in a particular area, like project cost management, perhaps you know earned value formulas upside down, then do not spend all your day long studying earned value, because you already know it, you're good at it. So it's very important that you focus on areas of weakness rather than focus on areas of strength. In order to identify the weak areas, you need to take practice tests, which takes us back to what we just talked about. So take practice tests, focus on your weak areas, It's all about finding the gaps in your knowledge. Oh, I understand that in order to develop the schedule, I need to have had the activity list. However, I didn't know that in order to create the activity list, I needed the work breakdown structure. Oh, that's a gap. So I need to go close that gap. I need to go study a little bit more about the WBS and what it's used for. I need to find all the areas in the Handbook guide that the WBS is used as an input or just used as a reference. That's what closing the gaps in your knowledge is all about. You see what you don't understand, you go back, close the gaps, and look for all other possible areas that topic could emerge. A good way of doing this is using flashcards. Use the flashcards that we provide. PMP exam flashcards that test your knowledge on all the inputs, the tools and techniques of project management. The question will ask you, what are the tools and techniques of that or this? And you will have 10 to 15 seconds to answer. At the end of the whole exercise, you'll be able to identify how many inputs, tools and techniques you don't know, maybe some you never even heard of. So it's a really good tool to use. You can use it on your commute, use it on the plane, use it in the house. Great tool. Another thing you need to do is study with a colleague or study group. Don't study in isolation. Why do I say that? It's not good to study in isolation because you need someone to ask you questions every now and again, test your knowledge, ad hoc, random, in the corridor. Perhaps you have a study group at work. Anyone can ask you any question at any time. It's a good practice. Good way of coming to grips with what is in the Handbook guide and what is on the exam. So have a colleague, have a study buddy. Very good thing to do. I said earlier, understand why the answer is correct. Not just the answer itself, but why. Learn from your mistakes. Put on your PMP thinking cap. What do I mean by PMP thinking cap? There's a particular way you are meant to answer questions for the PMP exam. In the real world, perhaps when you have a problem, the first thing you do is go to your boss. Good. But in the PMI mindset, you are the problem solver. So you need to put on your PMP thinking cap. What would the PMI do? You need to ask yourself that question. What does the PMI say? You see, the PMP exam has nothing to do with 5 years, 10 years, 30 years of your project management experience alone. It has to do with you understanding what the PMI advocates that the best practices are. Because remember, the Handbook guide is a standard. So this is the best practice in the profession that you're being given as a way forward. So do what the PMI would do. Let's talk about some of the materials we have. We have the Handbook Guide Audio Digest, 12 CDs, solid study of the Handbook Guide from chapters 1 to 12. Go through all the details regarding all the tools, all the techniques, all the processes, process groups, terms, phrases, and even material outside of the scope of the Handbook Guide. It's all covered in the Handbook Guide Audio Digest. Definitely a must-have, something that you need to get if you're just starting to study. It will definitely assist. Now, PMP Exam Flashcards is a 2 CD set. Like I said earlier, it covers the different tools, techniques, inputs and outputs of the different processes. Very good for your drive time. A good way of understanding what exactly is in the Handbook Guide with regards to inputs, tools and techniques and outputs. Now another good tool we have, which is totally free, is the PMP Exam Application Check Form. Really what this is, it is a document that enables you put in a start and a finish date for a project and estimate how much time you actually spent on each project for your application. Because the PMI will ask you, how many hours of hands-on project management do you have? And how can you split that into initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling and closing? Can you distribute your hours like that? If the answer is no, then you definitely need this form. And we have a video right there, that hyperlink, which will inform you of the best way to compile all the information that the PMI needs from you. Now let's talk about the PMP Handbook. This is a must read for you. You must ensure that you have the handbook, you go through it. Very importantly, it contains the PMI Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. You have to read that before you take the exam. So let's look very quickly through the handbook. First of all, the handbook addresses the family of credentials that you can see on your screen. We talked about that previously. Talking about PMI credentials, this ensures your dedication to the proficiency in project management. If you're PMP certified, people immediately identify, oh, he's proficient in project management, he's done that exam, he's definitely experienced. But to attain the credential, like we discussed previously, you have to satisfy the educational requirements. It distinguishes you and gives you recognition in the growing community of project management. Now, a good thing about this handbook is it outlines the whole process towards being certified. First of all, you have to submit your application, but before that, you have to ensure that you have all the right contact hours of study. Then your application will be reviewed in the next step, and then the payment process, and then the audit process, and then multiple choice exam eligibility. Obviously you have the exam, you have 1 year to pass the exam, and then you enter into the CCR, the certification requirements, because it's one thing to be certified, but you have to maintain those requirements. So you ask yourself, what do I need to be eligible to take the exam? Well, as far as project management experience, if you have a high school diploma or an associate's degree, you need 5 years of non-overlapping project management experience, which is at least 7,500 hours. You also need 35 contact hours of formal project management education. Now, if you have a bachelor's degree, or its global equivalent, you can see that you need 3 years, 36 months of unique, non-overlapping project management experience, 4,500 hours spent leading and managing projects across the 5 process groups, and 35 hours of formal project management education. One thing that the PMI stresses is if you worked on 3 projects from January to June simultaneously, those 3 projects only account for 6 months of project management experience. It doesn't account for 3 times 6 months, because you're working 6 months on 3 projects. That's not 18 months. That is still 6 months. And that's one of the things that they make sure that you're aware of in the handbook. It also makes you aware of the format. The number of scored questions is 125. You have 200 questions. 25 of the questions in the PMP exam are pre-test questions. That means they do not count. It also says that the time to complete the exam is 4 hours. It's preceded by the tutorial, just like I talked about. So this is all information we've somewhat discussed, but it's good for you to look at this and understand it. And also the percentage of the questions I showed you in the pie chart. You also need to understand that. And also the examination fees and so on. So there's lots of basic information that you need to understand here. And that will help you know what is expected of you before and after the exam. It talks about the application process. 5 business days for the online exam. If it's the paper-based exam, it's 10 business days and so on. Another key thing to note here is that you might be subjected to the audit process after you gain eligibility to test. It's not just before. You could have actually been given the green light, the go-ahead. Yes, you can take the exam, but an audit might suddenly emerge. So be aware of them and make sure that all your documentation is as accurate as possible. And that brings us to the end of studying for the PMP exam. If you have any questions whatsoever, contact us at info@praisezion.com or contact us at the phone number on your screen. I hope this was of benefit to you. Remember, studying makes perfect. Studying It's the only way to get the PMP exam under your belt. You have to study to the best of your ability. There's no way out, no shortcuts. Someone once asked the question, what's the quickest way to prepare for the PMP exam? And I said, there's no shortcut, because your exam could consist of anything. You could get any question from any area. So the best thing to do is to read all the areas, study all the areas to the best of your ability. That said, that brings us to the end of studying for the PMP exam. I hope this has been of benefit to you, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send an email. All the best to you in your endeavors, and most importantly, pass the PMP exam. I'll see you on the other side. Bye.